So lovely being here again, Oza. I love this platform. I've missed this platform. I've missed interacting with the FGLers. And yeah, I'm looking forward to a session that is very interactive with the FGLers. So without further ado, I'll go ahead and share my slides that I'll be talking through. And just like Ulihle said at the beginning, we will have an opportunity to have interaction and ask questions that are more specific to mathematics, because there's achieving 100% in other subjects, and then there's achieving 100% in mathematics. Those are different things. So today the
Exactly.
focus really is how do we become resilient and aim for 100% in mathematics. I was happy to see one learner who has done so for 2 terms in the learners you guys were celebrating, which makes me very happy. So just a structure of how we're going to go about our talk today. One of the first things we're going to talk about is just basically an introduction of, what is the subject we're talking about? What is this resilience that people refer to, and how does it look like? And what are the things that you want to pay attention to when you are referring to the term resilience? Also going back to how do we then bounce back, because not all the time that our plans go according to plan. So yeah, we need to then, chat a little bit about how to bounce back. And then I'll speak about areas that I think that FGLers need to pay attention in terms of where they can grow, so areas of growth, and then give a little bit of time to what is referred to as cognitive levels, which is basically how a paper is structured in mathematics, how it's divided in terms of, how steep in terms of difficulty level a question can be. So that's what cognitive levels basically are. And also the weights of the topics, because it matters. If you're going to a paper and you're wanting to get 100%, you are needing to know, how much does each topic actually count, so that okay, if algebra is one of your most, easiest topics that you can chow very easily, you want to know how much does algebra count, meaning that it also informs how much time you should be spending on that particular topic in terms of studying. And then we'll talk about what to do actually in the exam room, because that's where the 100% is actually created, is in the exam room. And then lastly, we want to get our hands dirty by actually doing some questions that will be, coming from directly from the FGLers. So I want to, while I'm speaking for the FGLers, to actually think about what topics do they battle with? What question are they wanting me to, to look at? Perhaps you can give me a topic and then tell me what grade you're in, and then I'll simulate a question from past papers, and then we'll look practically on the spot at that particular question. So mathematics is one of those subjects that I believe all FGLers do. It's a subject that is concerned with understanding numbers, but also understanding data, and also understanding how you can solve problems using your knowledge of numbers. So the problems can vary depending on the worldview you have. It could be in economics, it could be in actual science, it could be in medicine. There's so many fields that actually use mathematics. So it's such a backbone, subject that is important to each and every one of us. Hence, we've got now what is called mathematics literacy, because everyone actually needs to do some form of a mathematics in order to understand how to do basic numerics, and how to navigate, day-to-day questions that you might encounter in your day-to-day life. So that's what mathematics is. And majority of what we'll be speaking about today is what is called pure mathematics. So that is the subject that we are concerned about today. But before we speak about how to obtain 100%, we need to take a step back and think of where we are in the year currently. So in the year currently, we are mid-September. I know, FGLers have had an opportunity to interact with many other speakers. And in the interaction, part of what they probably got was a bit of motivation to go back to the drawing board and say, what am I aiming for in my respective subjects? And one of the things that usually happens around this time of the year, we all look at our, vision boards and we say, I had planned to get this, but I did not get it. So I'm a bit discouraged. So there might be FGLers who are in that space who are saying, Sis Thina, I hear this topic, but for me, I don't know. I've tried all that I can, and I'm here and I'm discouraged because for consistently 2 terms, I have not been able to produce the kind of results that I want. And I'm about to get another report, and I don't think I'll get the results that I want or I wanted. So I want us to know that, number one, that we're all in that space, whether you're an adult, whether you're a learner reflecting on your goals, we're all in that space where we are feeling sort of like we have shortchanged ourselves somewhere or somehow, or at least, that life hasn't been kind to us in the way that we have, sort of put ourselves out there and tried to do our best. So that might be the space that you're in as an FGLer. One of the things I really want you to think about and reflect on is the fact that part of what you're doing in aiming for 100% is remembering that it's an ongoing journey. So that's number one. And then also that in this journey that you're in, you might be aiming for something you've never attained before. So getting 100% means that you are consistently getting 100% throughout all your assessments. And then overall, it will be 100%. So at this point, you didn't get the 100%, but it doesn't mean that you can't aim for 100% still. So I want you to remember that, we are beginners. All of us have been beginners at one point in our lives. And, one thing that we can all relate on here in this platform and everyone else in the world really is majority of us had to learn how to walk. And now we do walking as if it's second nature. But at some point, we all could not walk. We all had to crawl first. And then we had to learn how to walk, but using, things around the house to move around and then successfully walk. And, at that age, you're not even thinking about running yet. But, at this age, you also can run. You can also do other things with your body and feet that seem to inform that you are comfortable where you are. And I'm making that example of walking, of learning how to walk with crawling first, and then, walking around with different objects as an analogy for you to think of the fact that aiming for whatever grade you are wanting in mathematics or in any other subject for that matter is going to be similar to that process of learning to walk. That other people, it will feel like, I man, these people were probably born running, but yet they were not. They were born, not knowing how to walk just like us. They had to crawl first and then, move around with objects and then walk and then run. And then others are high sprinters. Those are your 100%ers. But it didn't just happen overnight. So part of, becoming resilient is remembering that yes, you have aimed for that. Yes, you haven't gotten there yet, but it doesn't mean that it's the end of the world. And remember that process of walking, that maybe you are at that place where you thought you can walk in mathematics, and then suddenly you fell on the ground, and it has proven to you that actually maths and you are not best friends. So I know that some of you guys are feeling like that. You're feeling a bit of defeat, that this subject is just difficult. And perhaps this subject has its people. And I really want to say that I don't think it has its people, but it actually does have a process in place. And I'm hoping that today I can share what that process looks like, and that you can take some of those aspects of that process in order for you to go back. But in order to go back and remembering, how to be resilient, I want you to practice self-compassion. I think this is something that I always mention when I'm on this platform, is that most of you guys are high performers. And most of the time for high performers, one of the things that you actually do quite a lot is to be very hard on yourself. And I really want you to practice kindness with yourself, to say, yes, I'm still aiming for that goal. I haven't given up on it, but can I be kind on myself to say, maybe there and there, I actually did well. Acknowledge where you have done well. An example I can make when it comes to that is, I would like you to take your report, your previous year report. So if you're in grade 11, give yourself an opportunity to take your report from grade 10 and draw, a table that lists all your subjects, from your languages to your mathematics to all the other subjects you have selected. And then I want you to also have a column where you have the final grade you got, the level you got, and the percentage from the previous year. And I want you to have another column where, in that column now, you write what you got in term one for all those subjects. And then next to it, sorry, I want you to write what you have for term two, end of term two. And I want you to do a comparison there. And then in practicing self-compassion, I want you to just focus on the subjects where there is improvement, where you are acknowledging that here I actually did well. Yes, we're talking about mathematics and we want to, do well in mathematics. But it's also important for you to practice self-compassion and practice gratitude in the areas you actually did well. So that exercise of you taking your report, comparing with the previous year, term one and term two, and just focusing, just stream your eyes as, this high achiever only to the parts where you actually did well, and say, when it comes to, let's say, EMS, you have managed to stay steady. Sometimes staying steady in the same place is actually an achievement, because other subjects do drop. So maybe in the EMS, you've been, shuffling around the 70s, and maybe that is your moment of practicing gratitude in terms of, I have actually worked hard. And then visit another subject where you have, improved, and say, I was 60% here. I managed to get 70% in term one. And then in term two, which is an exact term, maybe you obtained a higher mark. I want you to tap yourself on the back and say, I've done well here, because practicing that gratitude is going to give you a perspective, a different perspective in terms of where you are, because we tend to zoom our eyes and our focus only to the things that we battle with, so much so that it discourages us and we forget about everything else. I want you to also learn how to reframe, some of the struggles you will note as you're doing that exercise. So as you're doing that exercise, yes, you will learn that some subjects you were steady in and some subjects you were improving in, but some subjects you will notice that you actually dropped. So one of the things that I want you to look at as you are planning your bouncing back strategy is, how do you then look at this as basically as an opportunity to grow, not just as, I failed here? Look at it as an opportunity. This is an area that I can grow in. So it means this particular subject maybe needs a bit of my attention. And this particular subject probably means that I need to have a strategy in place for it, to make sure that I can still obtain the goals I had set out for myself at the beginning of the year. So you're doing this exercise in correlation with what you have drawn up as your plans for the year. And it's so critical, guys, because we are in September. Most of you guys are probably wrapping up your end of term tests. If you are in a 4-term calendar school, you're wrapping up those tests and you are about to go on a break and then come back to term 4. So you really want to put your mind in the right space in terms of planning what will your strategy be for the final term, because that's like your last stretch of the race. And your last stretch of the race is so important, because you might have done something different in term one that maybe did not yield the results. And maybe you try to change things around in term 2 and things slightly improved. So you want to reflect on those moments so that you can say, one of the things I really want to continue doing in term 4 is what I did in term 2, whatever that is, or whatever that was that actually helped you in that particular subject. And you're the only one who knows what strategies you've put in place. And as you're practicing self-compassion, remember, it's not about lying to yourself. So if it was a case where you actually failed, to do what you know you should have done, which is maybe practicing the maths, you also want to talk to yourself kindly to say, hi, God, Thina. Here and here, you could have done better. You could have, missed out on A, B, and C to ensure that you are catching up on this particular subject, to make sure that you are doing well. So as you are planning this bouncing back strategy, those are the things I really want you to think about, is that we were all once beginners at something at some point in our lives. The walking is just an example. For someone else, it might be driving. For someone else, it might be being in a new grade. So being in a grade 12 is that you're a beginner in that grade. You've never done grade 12 before. So you're a beginner grade 12 learner. So in being a beginner grade 12 learner, you have to know that there's going to be a discomfort about being a beginner, because once you are used to something, it becomes so much of a second nature. So like walking, most of us, we don't think about how to walk. But if you talk to, a 2-year-old who's learning how to walk, they probably do a lot of strategizing before they actually walk. So if you're battling with a particular subject, let's say maths, it might be the case that you are, at a stage where you are learning to crawl just like that particular child. So you might need to do a lot of strategizing before you lift yourself up and actually learn how to walk in the subject mathematics. So to get 100% means you are a sprinter in this subject, and not just a sprinter, you're also a good marathon runner. And why do I make those examples? Because a sprinter is great at short distances. So short distances are an equivalent of writing short tests. So those are people who ace the short test, who ace, writing just one topic. But a marathon runner is one that is able to write an exam that has multiple topics, that has, topics that are intertwined with each other. That's a marathon runner, and run it successfully without running out of strength throughout the road. So we want you guys to not just be sprinters, to just be to learn how to also be marathon runners, to be able to endure the test of time. Because what is going to happen now is that some of your energies are down, and maybe you're going to get your report, and maybe it's going to look like what you wanted it to look like, or for some people it might look like what they didn't want it to look like. So one of the things I really want to pass as a message to you guys is that you're not alone. That's number one. I run an organization that has we tutor kids from across the country, and I meet all kinds of kids who want to get a distinction, but they're not here there yet. Kids who want to just to pass, but they're not there yet. So each and every of our goals will differ, but it's you that knows what is your goal, number one. And number two, how do you go about achieving that particular goal? So you need to revise. What was your strategy at the beginning of the year? Don't forget that strategy, because the energy is going down. So you might be saying to yourself, if I just pass this particular grade, I'm good. Then you forget what you had set out for yourself when it comes to what mark were you actually hoping to get in mathematics or in any other subject. So remember that. So so you are here, you've reflected on, where you were at the beginning of the year, how positive you were at this new grade, and what it will bring. And you're sitting and you're saying, but Sistina, I didn't achieve those things. And I tried my best. And I'm wondering, where might I have missed the plot? So one of the things I want to share with you guys is that some of the strategies that have worked for most students, I've come across, and also myself when I was a learner, is that you ought to schedule math studying time daily. There's something that I enjoy calling maths hour. So maths hour basically is routinely having an hour of mathematics every day, non-negotiable, and preferably at the same time. So why is math hour important? I'm sure Budmavo, when he comes in next time, he will speak about physics hour. These are subjects, mathematics, physics, accounting, these are subjects where practice is really crucial. It's like sports. So you can't just go and play the game without actually practicing. And you don't just practice for the game, you practice throughout for your fitness level. And the fitness we're talking about here today is the fitness of the brain, where the brain is so fit in terms of quickly doing mathematical problems, you exercising that part of your body to make sure that when you are seeing a math problem, it doesn't make you feel scared that you can't achieve it, or you can't tackle it. So we are wanting you guys to to ensure that if this wasn't part of your routine, that you actually bring it in to be part of your routine, that at the minimum 1 hour of mathematics is important. So when I used to run a hostel, one of the things that we used to do, we used to have a math hour for everyone at the same time. So it became like, a thing that we do together as a hostel with the girls, where 7 until 8 o'clock, everyone is doing maths, non-negotiable. And this doesn't mean that you do the maths because there is homework given at school. And the maths hour actually isn't for that. The maths hour is for practicing maths, so for strengthening the mathematics even further. It isn't for homework. So you can't say I won't be doing maths hour today because I don't have homework. Because people who want to achieve 100% don't do maths because there is homework. They don't do maths because there's a test coming up. They do maths because they have to do maths. And they don't do maths because they feel like mathematics that particular day. So this thing doesn't go with feelings, guys. It doesn't go with today I feel like doing maths. So it's training your body. It's that spirit of discipline, training your body that even when I don't feel like it, I will have to push and do it. I will have to do that 1 hour a day. And again, I emphasize that this is at the minimum. Another thing I want to emphasize that I actually spoke about in my last session with you guys is that the practicing of mathematics happens inside and also outside the classroom. So when you are in class, you are paying attention to the teacher. You are absorbing your English, absorbing all that she is saying or he is saying, and you are actually trying to make sense and process that information. But outside class, you want to then further go and understand that information on your own. So outside class time is also important. Hence, that maths hour is important, that you are not just paying attention in class and saying, I've learned my maths for the day. No, it doesn't go like that. Because subjects, maths or any other subject, when you are being taught, something always makes sense when it's being said by someone else, especially if you wanted to make sense, you will nod and you will agree with that person. But you will get stuck when you are doing it alone, and you don't want that. Hence, the outside of class time is so important. So you have to carve out time to make sure that you are actually doing maths outside class. So how do you do this? You revisit your notes, your class notes. So what will you do it today in class? And maybe what is it that the teacher will likely do in the next session, because you are then also wanting to make sure that you are pre-preparing for the class. Because if you've pre-prepared, it also means that by the time the teacher is starting the topic, it isn't totally a foreign concept to you. They're actually enlightening you about something that you have actually spent time trying to understand on your own. You go through the examples that were done in class, the examples that are available in your textbook, and any other extra resource available. So what's key about 100%, aiming for 100%, is that when you go above and beyond, so you're not just doing the things that were given by your teacher, you're actually going to look and source out other problems out there, past papers online, and so that you are able to see problems from all different angles. Because what then separates someone who gets an A versus someone who gets a B or a C is that the person who can't get an A or a B, it's because they've never seen a variety of questions. They are always expecting a certain kind of question, which I'll call level 1 or level 2 question. I'll explain that later. So those people who get those levels, it's because they're comfortable in that zone of answering questions they've seen before. But when you want to be comfortable with unseen problems, hence it's always important for you to remember that it's important for me to be a beginner at doing this. So being a beginner means that you are comfortable with discomfort. So like a child who's learning to walk, that child has never walked before. They will walk like, they look like they're a drunk person, how they're walking, because their legs are not stable yet. That's how it's going to feel when you are actually doing a new problem that you've never seen before. But believe you me, the more you see unfamiliar problems, the more confident you are in yourself in terms of your ability to tackle such problems. So it's about building that ability. So it's not you trying to know what problems always look like, because the next time you see a difficult question, it will not look like the one you've seen before. But your confidence level will be so high that you know that it doesn't matter how they throw it at me, I will know how to answer it. So that is just you practicing, and it's practicing inside and outside class. Never skip maths hour, guys. Consistency is important. As I said, it's not about feelings. It's not about how you're feeling today. Do I feel like maths or don't feel like maths? No, it's not like that. And then the other thing I want to emphasize is that I want you to be smart about any extra tuition you get. So extra tuition, it's people who actually, pay or who do extra tutoring with whoever, whether it's extra classes at your school or your parents have paid for you to actually get extra tutoring outside. I want you to be smart about those sessions. Whenever you get those sessions, make sure that they are driven by you. What do I mean by that? You go into those sessions because you, as someone who is wanting 100%, you have identified your own gaps. So you are driving those sessions to say to the tutor, look, when it comes to number patterns, I'm not completely lost. I know my basics. What I want you to then cover is A, B, and C, and D. If you are doing that, it means that the hour you have with that particular person is then utilized successfully and strategically. So that person is not going to now go back and revisit things you already know from class, that you already know from learning on your own, because you are actually wasting your resources, especially if that resource is paid for. So if you are doing extra tuition, I really want to emphasize that you want to be smart about it. You also want to be a good planner in informing your tutor to say, tutor, please make sure that today we are doing, difficult questions in this section, but you have also done your own preparation for that, because you can't say, I want to do difficult questions to the tutor, but when you show up to the session, you are showing up as someone who hasn't prepared for, the basics in that particular, because they can't do the difficult ones unless you are actually understanding what easier looks like. So you are understanding the basics of what the topic looks like. You are understanding the basic formulas incorporated in that. So you want to be smart about the extra tuition you get, and very smart with your time also. So extra tuition might also mean that it's the time you actually spend on maths hour. It might not mean that you're studying with someone who's assisting you. It might mean actually you're watching a video on YouTube. So now, instead of watching any, video, you are watching a video, you are wanting to watch a video that is speaking directly to your needs, so that you don't find that you don't have enough hours in a day because you've watched a video and this person for the first 30 minutes, they were talking about something you actually know. But if you are smart about your time, you're then going to say, no, I want a specific video here on YouTube, and this video maybe starts from, this part to this part, and I want to listen to this only from this person. Something else, again, I'm sure you've covered multiple of times when it comes to, planning your studying and whatever, is you want to minimize your distraction, guys. So distractions could be friends, it could be things, devices, social media, etc. Because if you have too many distraction from your goal, It means that if you are believing that, no man, this 100% thing is not possible, those distractions will, they will basically make you believe what you are believing, which is this is not possible. The more you minimize that noise, the better, because it means that when you are focusing on this, you're just focusing on this, and you don't have extra outside noise that will distract you from your goal. What is then also required in order for you to obtain 100%? Guys, 100% means that you are the memo. When I mark your thing, you look identical to the memo. Your thing and mine, the memo, looks alike. So it does require you to know your work, knowing your work thoroughly. So obtaining 100% means exactly that. It means you know your work from back to front, meaning that you've done all of these things in terms of spending the extra time, requiring, or going to get the extra tuition, whether it's from a friend or it's from a teacher or it's from YouTube, whatever the source is. You've done all those things, and you've gone out there to outsource other questions that aren't necessarily on your platform, wherever you get your questions from school, your exercises your teacher has given you, because your teacher will give you a base of exercises to practice on as a form of guidance in terms of, okay, guys, to practice for this test, practice this. But for you, because you are wanting 100%, you also want to go and see the unseen problems, the problems they might have not exposed you to, so that you are able to tackle those kinds of questions when the time comes. Okay, guys, we're in September.
Yes. So
Yes.
sorry to interrupt. I just want to, I love this concept of maths hour so much.
Yeah.
But if I'm trying to plan my day, when should I do maths hour, and what am I doing in maths hour? So if we're saying we're dedicating a minimum an hour a day to mathematics, am I doing it in the morning before school? Am I doing it in between studying other subjects, and I dedicate the specific hour to maths? And what am I doing? How am I testing my knowledge in that hour so that I'm using it effectively?
Sure. I love that question, Oza. I really love that question, because we are all different as people. So what you do in maths hour, I'll describe now. But when you do it, I'd really love to leave it to the FGLers. So I gave an example. For example, in my hostel, we used to dedicate 7 to 8 p.m. because that was just after supper time, and people are kickstarting their studying time, and we wanted to get the maths done and dusted before the other subjects start overwhelming people. So if you've got a day, for example, that you start in the morning, and then the afternoon is very busy with extracurricular activities, and you come back, you rest, you study, I would really recommend doing it like we were doing, which is start with the maths, especially if the maths is, a subject that you feel like you normally feel like it's the most difficult in your subjects. I would say get it done and out of the way. For other people, if you're a morning person, maybe the 7 to 8 p.m. might not be ideal. You might want to do it early in the morning before school starts. So if you are needing to be out of the house at 6:30, for example, and you can get yourself ready by 5:30, maybe 5:30 to 6:30 is your maths hour. And in that maths hour, this is what you do. You're basically doing a recap of what is currently happening in class at the moment. So you are recapping what is it that you are covering class. So you're trying to always make sure that you are on board with what is you are doing in class. So if, for example, the teacher is currently busy with algebra, and the last topic you did was factorizing, you are wanting to make sure that by the time you go to the teacher's next class, which is on the next day, if you're doing maths hour in the evening, or on the day, if you're doing maths hour in the morning, you are wanting to make sure that by the time you go to a next class, you don't have questions about what you did previously. So that is about reinforcing the knowledge of the current topic in class. So you first study the notes. It's an hour, so you want to be very smart about it. 15 minutes, I would recommend you study the notes of what you covered in class. You do a nice summary for yourself, but okay, these were the key focus things. We learned how to factorizing a binomial, how many brackets do I need to open, etc. The next 30 minutes, you want to do practice examples. So you're actually practicing. So you're not just sitting there absorbing information without actually doing something. So you actually want to practice some questions yourself so that you can test your knowledge to see, am I understanding what was being done in class? The last 15 minutes then, I want you to then go and look at exercises at the end of your chapter. There will always be exercises that are linking to each section. I want you to then go, in other textbooks, it's actually called test yourself. I want you to then go to that section in particular and then look at problems that are linked to the topic you're doing. Then test your skill to see, am I understanding what is being, being taught currently in class? Then you put a checklist and then you go, hence I'm saying Maths Hour is not for homework. So you can't say, I've done my Maths Hour because I've done the homework. I hope that's clear. Maths Hour is dedicated in keeping in touch with the work that you're currently doing in class and making sure that you are following. If you're then the kind of student that when you sit in class, you absorb that information and you get it when other people are like that, then it means the first 15 minutes you don't need to recap what was being done, because when you understand it, sure, then the whole hour for you, it's testing yourself, it's doing extra examples. And in some textbook, they will actually let you know which questions are actually difficult by putting a star, for example, next to the question. If you then are wanting 100%, you're going to do the basic questions, but you're also going to do the hard questions, because remember we said obtaining 100% is about not shying away from those hard questions. You want to go and confront those hard questions and get used to them and say, I am here, I'm not scared of you, and I'm going to attempt you, and I'm going to, struggle with you. I'm going to attempt this. And I'm saying this struggle with the question because it's not always the case that you'll flow through the question. You might not understand, because remember, it's about learning or reminding yourself that being a beginner is okay. So you might do a question and be like, I'm completely lost in terms of how to do this. Then that means that question is the question you take to class, right? It's the question you take to your extra tuition, to your tutor, to say, hey, bruh, I did learn my algebra. I know my basics, but I got stuck here when they asked this question this way. So you are also learning where your gaps are at. I hope I've captured you there, Oza.
Yes, you've got my Maths Hour absolutely sorted. Perfect. Notes, practice examples, and exercise those practical questions. I want to allow you to lean into your bouncing back. I do have just a few questions, but let me let you get into it first.
No worries at all, Oza. I think we do have time to interact. So if you do, even the FGLers, if they are noting something that I'm saying and they're worried about forgetting it, I think they can just, put it in the chat box. And then if there are any questions we can, like you just did now, that we can enter or sort of ask during the talk, I'm absolutely fine with that. So I'll continue then, if that's okay. So bouncing back, as I said, we are in September. We have gone through what are the basics that you are wanting to make sure that are in place, and you're also wanting to be honest. Was I faithful to the process? Because what I've just explained now is basically a process of what you ought to be doing in order to get those grades. And if you are not faithful to the process, then you have to be honest. But I know I was skipping some days when I get overwhelmed by accounting takes over, or when I've got a test, everything else falls apart, right? And I don't focus on the other things. So if you're not faithful in the process, then how do you then bounce back is the question. The question is, or rather the answer is, go back to the process itself. Go back to, yes, I didn't do Maths Hour every day, first term until now, but I'll be faithful to the process now. I will do it. And I'll be making sure that in my doing it, I'm going to make sure that, I'm doing it daily and I'm utilizing the time very effectively. And then you also want to make sure, this is something that I noted, that students in my years of teaching, when you give students their papers back, so it might be a test or an exam, the first thing a student wants to know is, what mark did they get? Sure, I don't fault them at that. After looking at the mark, the unfortunate part is that they never then try and understand, where did I go right and where did I go wrong? They focus on the mark, and then after getting the mark, it's a matter of, I'm very happy with my 80, let's say 80%, or I'm very sad with my 40%. But the question of what went wrong or what went right is never something people do immediately after getting the result. So you didn't do it first term until now. So what do we do? I want you to stack all your papers together, all the tests you've written to date. In some schools, you don't get them. I want you to go and ask for permission to make copies of your past papers, because it's important for you to see your scripts, to see what you wrote. Because remember, when you're in a test environment or in an exam environment, there is so much pressure in terms of what you are wanting to do, or what you're doing on the spot. Sometimes you don't remember what you wrote, etc., etc. So if a teacher gives you the paper and you just check your mark and give it back, you may never know where your gaps are really at. So I want you to go back, get all the papers, all the way from the first term until now that you have written. Give yourself time to reflect on those papers, especially if you've got a vacation coming up, a holiday, school holiday coming up. I want you to go and reflect on those papers. By reflecting, guys, I don't mean focus on the marks only. I mean, note that, oh, test one, we were covering algebra. I got 60%. Where I struggled, it was these kinds of questions. And some people might not know how to categorize their questions. Some might call them things like difficult questions. Some might call them wordy questions, or math, word problems in maths they struggle with. So sometimes you can call them unfamiliar questions. All those terms are not incorrect, because you might actually find that you are struggling with what is called level 3 and level 4 problems, which I'll explain later. So I want you to note all those things. Use whatever words to describe what problems you actually encountered in those tests and what did you get. Or maybe also have honest conversations of, I shame. This week was hectic when I was writing this exam, and there were two other subjects that I was focusing on, and I thought I had maths under control, and that's why I failed. Sometimes that's your reflection, right? Reflect and review all those tests. And sometimes this reviewing might be a process you don't do alone. So you might, if you're someone who has a tutor, you might want to do it with a tutor, because a tutor then has an extra set of glasses, which is their experience. They are looking at this through their lens of experience to say, oh, I can see, man, the way she's really struggling is here and here. These are the kinds of questions she struggles with, meaning that when Umbalenhle is needing to practice, she's needing to practice these kinds of questions that can be done either by your teacher or by a tutor or anyone who has experience in mathematics, to be able to guide you to say, the reason why you are battling to you basically, people when they exercise and they lose weight, they usually get that point where they stop losing weight. I think it's called the plateauing or whatever in fancy word it is. They plateau and they can't lose further weight basically. And sometimes that's what happens with math students, is that they work hard, they do all these things, and they always getting 70, and they don't know why. And sometimes it's that extra 30% that you are not tackling these kinds of questions, and you need someone else to actually give it a name. What are these kinds of questions? And show me, how do they normally look like? And also, what do I do in order to make sure that they don't give me the same problems again? Also, I see your faces back, so I'm assuming that you're wanting to jump in and say something.
I did, because when you mentioned Umbalenhle, I noticed that she actually has her hand up.
She
Before
does.
we go to her, I'd like to remind the FGLers that as soon as you log into the session, you are noted on the system that you are present. So we don't need to send messages on the chat box saying so-and-so is present. We have noted that you are present. We do want to use that chat box to really get engaged with us, Thina, on key questions on what we're just doing now, which is aiming for 100% in mathematics. Umbalenhle, you had your hand up, Sissy. How can we help?
Okay, afternoon, ma'am.
Hello,
I hope
Bali.
everyone is doing well. Ma'am, I wanted to ask a question. Let's say you were doing, or your previous study methods are not working for you because maybe you've reached a point where like your content of the content of what you're studying is not similar or the same to what you were studying back then, like it's getting a bit more tough and you feel it not working and you're kind of overwhelmed because we reached this time of the year and now you're just like, yo, let me get out of this grade. How can you stay consistent or try to find a better study plan?
Sure. I love that question, Gambadi. I think it's exactly what we're speaking about today, Mbadi, which is you think you've done it, you know your processes, and somehow you've gotten to that place where you're plateauing. So let me cover the bouncing back, which is responding to your question, Mbadi. And if it doesn't actually adequately cover you, I want you to then, lift your hand up again and say, Sistina, I don't think you've answered me. So let me just continue and hopefully this will answer you. So you're reflecting on all those past papers, you note things down. Test one, I got this, the topic was this, and this is the mark I got, and this is what I noted. And as I said, make copies if you don't have those at your disposal. Go to your teacher to say, I'm actually curious, teacher. My goal in this particular subject is dash dash, whatever the number is for you. And I have been getting consistently 60s. And I want to know how to get to the 80. Let that person who has that extra pair of glasses, which is their experience in the subject, guide you in terms of your problem, Mbali, is when it comes to this section, even when you are marking students, you actually note this one sort of their energy dropped as they were going on and on and on with the paper, and that usually happens. So the teacher might be able to say, I've noted this about you, especially if it's your teacher. They will say, when I mark your paper, you come along in question 1 and question 2 fine, and question 3, and they'll be able to also tell you that usually my questions 1, 2, and 3 are easy, but when you get to 4 and 5, your energy seems to drop. So your problem is there's something going on with the 4 and 5. And if that's your problem, for example, I would suggest actually start with 4 and 5. Start with the hard ones. Because when you do the easy ones and then your energy starts, dwindling. So maybe channeling your energy to say, let me start with 4 and 5. And don't just do it in the exam. Do it first in what I usually call mock exams inside, at home, right? You practice this strategy at home. You don't want to be starting new tricks in the exam room or in the testing room. So if, for example, that's your problem, that 1 or 2 or 3, if it's 5 questions, the first 3 you get fine. The last 2, which are usually difficult or tricky or unseen problems, you then have a problem with. So maybe it might be a case that you need to practice quite a lot of those kinds of problems and also change your strategy by starting with those questions in your exam and then finishing off strong with the easy questions that you can do even almost with your eyes closed. And then the other thing I want to say is mathematics is divided into sections. I want you to dedicate time for each section. Each topic must have its own time. Dedicate that time for each section. Assess yourself for each session. And as you are studying each session, I want you to have something I call a cheat sheet. Basically, a piece of paper, you write on that piece of paper just a segment, Anyana, to say, in this particular chapter that was concerned with number patterns, one of the key formulas is, learning how to deal with a linear pattern, learning how to deal with a quadratic pattern, or whatever pattern. And these are the formulas, that I need to remember when it comes to this. And when you're doing your cheat sheet, you want your whole subject to be able to be covered in one page, one A4 page. So you're not writing a lot, you're writing the key things that are concerned with that particular topic. But in patterns, there's 3 formulas. And in those 3 formulas, I must remember, if I'm looking at a linear pattern, this is how it behaves. If I'm looking at a quadratic pattern, this is how it behaves. And also use your own language. I know, most of you guys are not all, what do you call this, first language English speakers at home. If you speak Xhosa, use Xhosa to explain what is going on so that you are able to reflect on what happens, because you are wanting a system in which your brain will keep this information. So it doesn't have to be formal. You're not writing the summary for your teacher, you're writing it for yourself. So you summarize all those topics, and every time you finish a topic, you assess yourself. So that's what tests are for, even during the year, that your teacher will teach you this particular topic, and then there'll be an assessment after. So you've got your cheat sheet. The other reason this cheat sheet or formula notebook is important is because one of the things you want to do once you jump into past papers now, because if you noted, I haven't mentioned in this strategy, you're visiting your past tests, which is our assessments, you are revising, you haven't done past papers, past exam yet. So you want to, by the time you do past exam papers, that you are not opening textbooks to go and say, oh, chapter smang, page what, I'm looking for this. No, all the things you are looking for must be in this small paper of yours. And eventually, you want to photocopy this paper into your brain. So the key in writing it is that you want all this information to be where to be in your brain. That's the whole point of it, because you're not going to walk into your exam with a cheat sheet. The point of it is to say, okay, I'm done with this particular topic. These are the key things I need to remember in it. I'm done with this particular topic. These are the key things I need to remember in it. And then once you're done with that, you then say, I am now doing what? Past papers. In the past papers now, the topics are not segmented per se. All the topics are visible in your past paper. So it is what is normally called, a comprehensive, kind of assessment. It's a formal assessment also, and it also weighs more than it weighs more than the other ones you do during the year. So in the past paper now, you are doing past papers. Why are you doing that? Number one, you want to see the style of questioning. So you want to note, because guys, there's styles of doing things. So for example, if people tell you about, gqom music, there's a reason why we can identify that this genre is gqom music. So even in maths, there's a reason why a problem, I can read it and say, this is a calculus problem, right? So you want to be able to tell the genre of the problem that you are dealing with. That's what you're doing past papers for. You're able to tell the style that they question. So if most of you guys are non-IEB, for example, you go to non-IEB schools, you will note that the genre in which the paper flows is always the same. You will always get algebra as your first question, patterns as your second question, and then, a finance, and then functions, and calculus, and then so forth. So you are wanting to know how this normally flows so that you are familiar with how a paper looks like. So that, because the exam day is pressured, guys, you don't want to add extra pressure by seeing a past paper for the first time, or rather seeing a paper for the first time in the exam. You must see a lot of past papers before you go into the exam. How many? I don't know exactly. I can't give you a number, but a lot. At a minimum, you must see the past 3 years. So if you are writing, let's say you're a matriculant and you are writing 2023 exams, you must definitely have seen 2022 papers, 2021 papers, 2020 papers. Do you stop there? No, if you've got the time, go back. Go back, go back, because the curriculum takes a while to change. The last time the maths curriculum changed was 2013, I believe. So there's a lot that you can practice between now and then, for you to be able to see, I've seen all angles. Doesn't matter who the examiner was, I've seen it, whether I'm looking at it this way or this way. The other thing you want to see in the past paper is the mark allocation. How are marks allocated? And what does the mark allocation actually mean? In short, in all subjects, mark allocation actually translates to, how much you actually should be putting into that particular question. So for example, in mathematics, if they say write down the turning point of this graph, the key word there is write down. So if they're saying write down, they're not saying work out, they're not saying determine. It means that the answer is in front of you. They want you to copy the answer and write it down. So you shouldn't be wasting your energy working out stuff. So even the words that are utilized in the question are key in you understanding what is expected of you in terms of the answer. And what kind of answer should you be providing marks-wise? Because if you're then answering something that looks like, you know, a 10-mark question because of the length, in a 2-mark question, then maybe there's something you are doing wrong. So the mark allocation is very important. The types of questions, I've alluded to that. You want to see what kinds of questions do they ask in different topics. And then you also want to see, you know, how you will do, how you will do when you're practicing, how will you do in the past paper when the questions are all combined. Because guys, it's very easy to write one topic test, but now when the marks, or rather when the topics are combined, and the examiner or your teacher has the ability to mix two topics, intertwine two topics in one question, that's something that teachers do in exams. Then you are able to see those kinds of questions. How do they come about? How do you answer them? How do you tackle them? So this is also very important, especially for IEB students, because for IEB, how they assess, really, they want to assess how you are able to apply the knowledge. So assessment in IEB is slightly different. So you are wanting to see how is it being asked, and what's the likelihood that it will change the next time, and how will it change, and how will I do when it has changed? And then the other thing you want to be able to what is to able to also get an opportunity to see how do you manage with your time. Guys, time management, we speak about it quite a lot, but time management in the exam is also critical, and practicing it doesn't happen in the exam, on the exam day rather, it happens before. So I usually say allocate time. If your paper is 3 hours, allocate a 3-hour slot where you're actually practicing you know, a full paper 1 math, or a full paper 2 math, where you are actually wanting to see, here's a timer, I've set it, I've set the exam conditions, it's quiet, no one is going to disturb me, I've communicated with my family that I'm about to practice a paper, and then you do it, and you want to see, was I able to finish? Where did I spend most of my time? How did I do when it comes to, you know, managing my time in particular questions? Because sometimes people spend a lot of time on difficult questions that they don't know when to let go, and go to other questions. So you want to be able to practice those skills of saying, hey, this question is tough. I give it to teacher Thina. She really, question, she's made it very tough. But now I can't be spending, you know, almost 30 minutes just trying to figure out a 10-mark question, right? Because I need to move to other questions. So now you're also wanting to see that when you're doing past papers, you're wanting to see how do you manage, how do you fare out in terms of spending your time in the exam. Again, maths hour. All right. The next thing I want to talk about is where are then the areas of growth? Okay, Oza.
I just want to go back on the past papers thing. It's such a big deal, you know, and most of the FGLers sit with, okay, so when do I start doing past papers? Am I only doing past papers to prepare for exams, or am I doing past papers in the term testing environment? And also, how many past papers must I do? You did say that you don't know how many, but you do as much as you can. It made me reflect on when we had Caleb, who said he did 100 past papers in order to achieve 100%. So you've highlighted why it's important to do past papers, but how often and when, like within my routine, when do I slot in the past papers?
That's a nice question, Oza. I think, you know, past papers, you don't keep them because you are preparing for exams. Because if you remember, one of the things I said, when you are preparing, or rather in this process that the students are in of, I'm in term 3, I'm preparing for, you know, I'm getting into term 4, which is a term on its own. It will have its own tests, but there'll be a major exam. You do past papers even when you are preparing for the small tests, but obviously you're not doing the entire paper. So if, for example, you are being tested on finance, and that's the topic you're doing next term, you're going to go to the past paper to go and just look for question 6 or question 5 that is concerned with the topic that you are writing on. So in the past paper, the likelihood that a question will link to a topic is that there's only going to be one question per topic or two, so you're not doing the entire paper. That's what's different between doing past paper because you're preparing for exams. So exam terms in 4-term schools are going to be your June and your December or November, right? So if you are preparing for exams, you obviously are going to do the entire paper or the entire papers, the many papers you'll do in preparation for the exam. And you're not doing it a day before the exam. You're not doing it a week before the exam. So all schools that are, properly structured and are working efficiently, they will release your dates of exams very early, right? So for example, some students, it's September now, by the beginning of 4th term, most students will know when they are writing their finals, right? So at the beginning of 4th term or somewhere in the middle of 4th term, they will know when they are writing. It's somewhere in October, somewhere in November. You've got your timetable in order. You will also know when your school will be done with the curriculum. So there will be a time where your teacher will say, we are now done with all topics. We are just revising. So it means that is an indication to you that actually it's time for me to delve into past papers holistically now. So I can do an entire paper, a one sit kind of, this is a 3-hour paper, I'm going to sit and do the whole thing. But if you're preparing for a test and you're just needing a section, you also use past papers. So you're not keeping them for exam terms. You use them because they are an extra source of questions of how, teachers will ask you. And let me tell you something, we're human. And there are times where we go and source questions for our tests from the past papers. So the past papers are actually useful. Like the matrix who wrote now in September, one of their questions in maths was from a past paper. Like exactly, nothing was changed. Nothing was changed. So the benefit of doing past papers is that you also get those cherry on tops where you're like, Aibo, I've seen this exactly as it is. So I just need to replicate what I've seen before. So that's the benefit of the past paper. So you're not waiting until you get to exam term or close to exams. You do them as soon as possible. So if you know your timetable, make sure that by the time you're scheduling your studying, you are able to then do a paper, a holistic paper at the end of, I am finished studying. Don't do them prematurely though. I do want to say that. You don't want to do past papers as an indication of, let me see whether I understand. No, do your studying fully and do the past papers to say, I'm testing my knowledge. Now I'm ready for battle room, basically, or war room. I'm ready to go and assess myself. So yeah, you do them close to the time if you're doing them holistically, but not too close to the actual date, such that you are just trying to see, oh no, you want to give yourself plenty of time to see the patterns, because that's the point of doing a past paper, is to see, are there patterns involved here? Is there something to note, that these teachers seem to always be doing? You are studying the people who are testing, but what is it, what goes on in their minds? And part of what I'll talk about in the next slide, not this one, is that some of those things are not hidden. They are not, they're not rocket science. They're actually things that are, it's information that's available. Maybe some teachers don't talk about, but the breakdown of how your paper should look like is something you ought to know as a math student. All right, I hope I've captured you there, Oza, regarding past papers. And then now you want to go into areas of growth. You are bouncing back, guys. So there are obviously areas of growth. These are what you could call places where, maybe there are weaknesses to strengthen and make sure that, by the time you are writing finals, you are not finding yourself in the same place where you are feeling stuck. So mock exams, what I've just described, please make sure you do them. That is you creating an environment to pretend as if you're actually writing a paper, and you actually write the paper and mark yourself, right? And look at, the assessments, as I said, you had already written, because they will also tell you a story of, this was Thina in March, she did this, she didn't understand this, this is yourself, now, but okay, this is where I need to fix. So you are there with the past papers and all, you are there to identify the gaps, etc. And you are there to identify topics that you still need to master. And also you are wanting to see the types of questions that seem to be your area of weakness, because you'll notice a pattern, guys. I promise you, if you give me a student and you give me their set of past papers, their set of, what do you call this, their exams, I can tell you their areas of weakness just by assessing how they answer their script. So you are able to then do that, and then you can do that with the help of your teacher at times, or the help of a tutor. You review these areas of growth, and I also encourage you to go and consult, guys. Teachers love it when you go to them and say, teacher, I know you are brilliant at what you do. Please help me look at what is going on here in terms of my understanding when it comes to this topic. You will get guidance from the teacher or the tutor. That's number one. And students, or teachers rather, love students who care about their work. So the other element of it is that they'll be fond of you, and sometimes you do want your teacher to be fond of you, but man, Ulihle actually cares. She comes to me and actually checks, but where could I have improved, etc., etc. And then something else that is also of benefit to you to go to your teachers, that if they're, feeling, nice, they might drop a hint or two here and there, because you have taken the extra time, because not many students actually do that. Not many students actually go and consult teachers, consult lecturers, etc. So you might get a hint, a tip or there to say, look, when it comes to this, watch out for this. When it comes to this, now you have this tip box where now you can take and say, okay, my teacher said the focus, so you have another internal scope from someone who actually knows what is going on. And why are you doing this? You are doing this in order to consolidate the areas of growth and then be able to practice again, because that's where we are at. In September, you have practiced some of these topics. So in some topics, you are needing to practice again. You're needing to revisit those topics and say, where were the areas of weakness and where can I revisit them? So that's what you are wanting to do. So I've been referring to levels, and I know some people are like, oh, I don't know what you're talking about. So in psychology, they talk about, cognitive levels. And there's something that usually guides us as educators. It's a bit outdated now, but it's called Bloom's taxonomy. But basically what Bloom's taxonomy is, it's basically a triangle, a pyramid of sorts, that tells you as a teacher in your particular subject, how do you allocate questions, right? In a particular test and a particular assessment. Let's focus on an exam. So in an exam, as a teacher, you are needing to make sure that they are all cognitive levels, because you've got different kinds of students in your class. So there's, your basic cognitive level, which is just knowledge. We call that knowledge. So what is that? It's the ability to recall information. So someone might say the theorem of Pythagoras says x squared plus y squared equals to r squared. And then you replicate that in the exam. You say x squared plus y squared is equal to r squared. You don't know why that's the case. You don't care why that's the case, but you are able to reproduce what the teacher has said. So that's what, recalling is, right? It's being able to repeat what was being said. So everyone has that ability to remember what was being said, ability to identify, but okay, if I've got this problem in maths or physics, this is the formula I'm needing to use, right? So you haven't done anything sophisticated in terms of learning. You are just able to identify what knowledge is needed in this particular question, right? So it's being able to use facts that you know. So a fact might be the sum of angles in a triangle sum up to 180. That's recalling. So that's your basic level. Being able to round off. I mean, you learn that as early mathematics. So even that is allocated marks, right? Understanding your mathematics vocabulary, right? But what am I supposed to say here? Am I differentiating, or is it called the derivative? Is there a difference? So that is just knowledge. And 20% of the 100% is allocated to just knowing your work, knowledge, right? Recalling, identifying, and an end. How many marks might this be? If you're writing a 150 mark paper, this is 30 marks. So 30 marks are already in your pocket, FGLers, because you are able to remember what you were told, full stop. Second level, so that's your basic level knowledge. The second level is routine procedures. So when someone say a routine, it means that this is something that, it's repetitive to some sense. You are able to repeat what was being done. These are the kinds of questions you might have seen in class already, but the teacher has changed one or two things to reproduce the same kind of problem, because they're giving an opportunity to students, everyone, not any kind of students, everyone, to be able to do questions that are not very demanding, all right? So what other kinds of problems are routine procedures? It might be a proof that a teacher has done in class. So what's nice about high school is that it's very unlikely, especially at the lower grades, 10 and below, to be asked to prove something that you have never seen how to prove it before, right? So proofs that you are supposed to repeat, that are prescribed proofs that are done in class, those are part of the routine procedure, because the only thing it requires is you sitting down, applying your mind and remembering how it is done, the steps that you need to follow. So basically that's it. Sometimes it might be how a particular formula has been derived. Sometimes it might be how to perform procedures that we all know in mathematics, right? So simple applications and calculations, which involve following a few steps. So that's again following under routine procedures. Identifying and using the correct formula. Again, you can see here, there's this identifying of the formula. You saw that in knowledge, but now the difference is that in routine procedures, you're not just identifying, you must be able to use the formula, right? So that's the difference between someone who has just the knowledge, who can just identify, but I'm supposed to use this formula. But now if you are at this level, level 2, you are then able to identify the formula and be able to use it. And then again, things that you've encountered in class, that's what falls under routine procedures. And how much is that? 35%. What does this mean? It means that 20% plus 35%, which is 55%, everyone ought to get that in mathematics. That's what it means. It means that the paper is set out such that everyone in the class should be able, at the minimum, at the bare minimum, to get 55%, because the 35%, it's stuff you've seen in class. The 20%, it's stuff that was defined in class before the topic was, we delved deep into it and did examples, etc. So that 55% is level 1 and level 2. Now, the teacher also needs to think about level 3 questions. I usually say level 3 questions are what takes you from 55% to an 80, right? So anyway, to a B as a maximum, right? 79%. So those are complex procedures. So they're no longer routine procedures, which are simple. They are now complex procedures. How do you know this is a complex procedure? It's a problem that involves, complex calculations and high order reasoning. So you're not just following, but this is how you walk, right? There is reasoning that you need to follow. You must support a statement with a reason. But the reason why I'm doing this is because of this. So the teacher now is testing your reasoning level. You're no longer just doing, you're no longer fetching the water. You're also telling the teacher, I have chosen the bigger bucket to fetch the water because the smaller one I will never finish if I use it, as an example. Or if I use the bucket with holes, I will never finish because I keep on dropping water as I go. So this is a reasoning focused kind of section. It's not an obvious, the solution is not always obvious, right? That's why it's not easy to get to the 80%. And it is normally intertwined with real world problems, which students normally shy away from. The minute they say, oh, I went to the shop and she was cycling this many kilometers per hour, and then it's like, oh, it's giving maths lit vibes. And you know, your pure math students normally shy away. It's too much English. But if you break down that English, which I hope we can do at the end, you will then realize beyond that English is mathematics. And that's what we are. We are mathematicians, all of us in this group. So you being able to break down those concepts is so important. And then something else that is very important here is that there's that intertwining I spoke about, which is where the topics are taught in silos, but it's important that you understand the interaction between the topics, that you might be asked something that needs you to use something from paper 2, say, you know, analytical geometry, but part of paper 1. So that is the teacher trying to see, but do you study these topics in segments, or are you able to see that they can relate sometimes? That if we're talking about maximizing in calculus, we haven't dropped all the knowledge we were taught in functions in terms of how to maximize, right? So that's what's happening here when it comes to, it's practicing those questions that can mix different topics together. And it does require a particular level of conceptual understanding. You must understand the concepts that you were taught. And then most important, it's the integration of the topics. The topics are intertwined with each other, and that is about 30% of your paper. So now, how much percent are we sitting at? 85%. So in order to be able to get above 55%, you must be applying yourself a little bit more than the minimum 55% everyone is meant to get. The question now is, how do you get from 85 to 100? And we are here, we are wanting 100%, or we're aiming for 100%. Now we're at level 4. This is problem solving, non-routine problems. The problems are unfamiliar. You've never seen it before, so it won't look like. So part of it, hence I was making that example about being, you know, learning how to walk. The child who's learning to walk at 2 has never walked before. But the reason why they are comfortable, or rather the reason why they are trying to walk, is because they're wanting to try this unfamiliar thing. So it means that in order to get to this 100%, you must be like that child. You must be able to say, I might fall, I might, you know, stumble, I might have to hold on to something, but I will attempt this question. That's what's required here. You've never seen the problem before. It's unseen. It's high order reasoning. So it's not just basic reason, it's high order reasoning. You are able to, you are also needing to process information that is involved. And then also, it might also need you to, you know, break the problem down into parts. And that's what I wanted to ask to focus on. So I'm needing to rush a bit here because I want us to look at those kinds of problems. Now, next up is, what is the breakdown? I've given here, I've shared here rather, grade 10 to 12. Every school is meant to give you a sense of how your topics are broken down. You guys normally call it a scope. Your teacher will tell you, when it comes to this particular topic, you should expect this many marks. This topic, this many marks. Why is that important? One of the things I usually say is that we're not always strong in all topics. So this kind of breakdown of weight of how much each topic counts is to help you actually understand, hey, can I afford actually to not know functions if I'm aiming for 100%? If you can see here, functions, where are we? For grade 10 to 12, they count roughly about between 30 to 45. That's a lot of marks. So if it's 30 out of 100, that's 30%. If it's 45 or 35 out of 150, it's a lot of marks. So it will give you a sense of what are topics that I can't afford to not know. And in fact, because the marks are small, for example, statistics, it doesn't mean that those are things you can afford to not know. For example, I usually say to my students, statistics is one of those topics that are easy. And I'm not saying that because I'm a statistician. Stats at high school is so basic that it is, it is redundant, it is repetitive, it falls under your routine procedures. Most of the questions they'll ask you will be here. So you can't afford to not know that particular topic. It must be marks that you know by, okay, for my paper 2, I already know that when it comes to statistics, I've already have those marks in order. And they've made a note here next to paper 1 that grade 12 book work maximum of 6 marks. What does that mean? It means that there will be proofs, like I mentioned in the level 2, that you are expected to reproduce. For grade 12, for example, it's worth 6 marks. So a grade 12 learner walks into a paper knowing that a 6-mark question is something I've seen before, for sure, that I need to repeat. And for paper 2, it's 12 marks. So that's something you also need to walk into the paper knowing if you are someone who wants 100%. Something else I want to mention is that in your mathematics working, you want to work with knowing your work, but also knowing how to write it. So sometimes we want to use shorthand, short notations, but we don't know how to adequately write it, especially if you're at matric level. Maybe in earlier grades, your teacher can be a bit forgiving in you writing shorthand that she can understand, she or he can understand. But remember, at matric level, you're being marked by someone else. So you are wanting to write as the person will understand it. So there are theorems, statements, right? That's a statement. There's reasons, and you can write the reason in a short way. So that's our way of writing angles on a straight line. So you don't have to write the full word angles. That's how we write angle. So you also want to know what are the short versions that are acceptable in your paper so that you don't lose marks unnecessarily. That's another example of how we write statements that are supported by reasonings in short ways. That's an example I added because I know there's also grade 8 and 9 learners. So there's quadrilateral statements there, and then there's also reasoning. And obviously these are things I'm not expecting FGLers to copy down, and I can make this presentation also available. During the exam, this is the day now. What do? You plan your time well in the exam. So the example we gave to the student who asked the question of how do you do it, and I said sometimes you have to plan well such that you say, I know I waste a lot of time in difficult questions. Maybe I should start with all my easy questions, then do difficult. Or I waste a lot of time in easy questions and I never get to the difficult. Maybe your challenge then is to make sure that when you're practicing, you're focusing on starting with the difficult and then going to the easy. So make sure that the planning of the time has happened outside the exam. When you're going into the exam, you continue with that strategy you learned during your practicing. Steps, guys. Maths is critical that you include your steps. Even when to you they seem like they are redundant, include the steps that are important because they give you marks. The marks are allocated according to steps. And then also pay attention to the mark allocation. I've said this before, that the mark allocation is an indication of how much work you actually need to do. And then something else that's important is if you get stuck, do not stay in that question for too long, because you will stay in that question, look at it left, right, and center, but you're running out of time of other topics you could have capitalized on when it comes to marks. This is a marks collecting strategy. You're in the exam to collect marks and also to display your knowledge of the topic. But I want to know your knowledge if it's in your head and you didn't write it down. So with my last point on this particular slide, please make sure that you leave no stone unturned. Attempt every question in the paper, hard, easy, especially with the hard questions. If you feel like it's hard, make sure you attempt it so that even the little you've written maybe was going in the right direction. You might get a mark or 2 for writing that particular thing. All right, this is the fun part that I'm really excited about, Oza, which is us getting our hands dirty with the FGLers. So guys, this is the time where I'm hoping some of you guys will have questions and you'll ask me actually, a question that's direct to say, Sis Thina, I'm a grade what learner. Could we do a question in, this particular topic? And that's what we'll do. Come on, FGLers.
Yeah. I love it, Thina. Thank you so, so much. While they think of their questions or while they write down their question, there is one that came up in terms of the cognitive levels, just so we run through that again in terms of my grading. So the basic levels of level 1 and 2 get me to just above 55%.
Yeah.
But if I'm really aiming for 100%, then I should be looking at questions that are testing my routine procedures and are testing complex procedures. Can you pretty please go to maybe a grade 11 question that will show a complex procedure and a problem solving one, just so that we understand that this is where we're not dealing with 55%, we're dealing with 70 and that 100% level.
Okay. Okay, we've got a hand there. We've got a hand there. I'm excited about that. But to answer you, Oza, then here's a grade 11 paper. And in this grade 11 paper, it's in Afrikaans. We don't want that. Here's a grade 11. Why? Oh, come on now.
Afrikaans.
English. Okay. Let's do that. Maybe Umbali can ask a question while I am finding the English one when Oza.
Probably. Perfect. Mbali, your hand is up. You have the floor.
I'm in grade 11. I was asking, I wanted to ask a question based on the topics I usually struggle with because I want to see how you tackle it. So those topics are mainly like Euclidean and probability.
All right, let's start with probability because I've got paper 1 open here, and that's it's linked to what Oza was wanting me to do. So let's go for probability. Here we go, Mbali, and any other grade 11 learners, even grade 12 and grade 10 can listen here. So we've got a question here. Let's start with 8.2. Or rather 8.1 is fine. A bag contains 3 marbles and 3 blue marbles and 2 red marbles. A marble is taken from the bag. Okay, so this is how you don't do it. You don't do it like this. A bag contains 3 marbles, 2 marbles, okay, a second marble. You don't do that because you're giving yourself the task of having to repeat that question in terms of reading it. So your first time reading it, you must make it count. So you read it like this. A bag contains 3 blue marbles. You underline that for yourself. Okay, there's 3 blue ones. There's 2 red ones. A marble is taken from the bag. So you've got a bag here, and the bag has 5 marbles in total. 3 of them are blue, and 2 of them are red. So you write that down for yourself. So basically, you're breaking down the question already for yourself. And then a marble is taken from the bag, the color is recorded, and the marble is put inside. Put inside. Oh, no, Thina, you read it wrong. Put aside. You see, I read it twice and I noted it's actually aside. This is an important part of probability because there is something called taking out with replacement and taking out without replacement. So without replacement means that if I take it out, I don't put it back in. So if I take out a ball and I put it outside, or a marble rather, it means after I've taken it out, I've got 4 marbles left. So you are noting all these key things. The examiner, I usually say, the examiner puts each and every word there for a reason. So when you are reading, you're underlining whatever information is key. So it's put aside. So you can even write it there for yourself without replacement. I won't write it without replacement.
So sorry to interrupt you. The screen is frozen on my side. I actually can't see the question. I don't know if it's frozen generally. I don't know if the link is not active anymore.
Can someone else also confirm?
Also on my side, I can't see.
Oh, I see. Okay. Is the question visible now?
No, not at the moment.
What do you see on your side? What do you see on your side, Oza?
So we still see the initial links of the 3 question papers.
Okay, that's fine. I'll do something quickly. Sorry about that.
All right.
All right. Can you see my slides in general, though?
Yes, we can. And we can see you now
Okay.
moving back to the, so that's great.
Okay.
So it's a great question, this probabilities one, because Subabalu also had the same question.
Oh, lovely.
Probability is the worst for me. It's easy, but it's hard. It's asking what it's not asking. So just positioning myself on how to tackle it. So it's a great question.
Okay, cool. Lovely. Okay. Okay. Can everyone see it now on the slides? Because I've put it on my slides
Perfect.
instead of using the link.
Yes, we can see perfectly.
Okay.
Thanks, Thina.
Okay, that's fine then. So what you want to underline there is that you've got 3 marbles. You've got 3 marbles that are blue. You've got 2 marbles that are red. And then you also want to draw a bag for yourself. I'm a visual learner, so I would draw a bag. And then you also want to underline that once a marble is taken out, it is put aside, because in that information, there's something that's hidden, which is something called, pulling out with replacement or without replacement. So here, there's no replacement, so we don't put it back after we've taken out. And then they take a second marble out, and the color is recorded, and then they put aside. So how many times are we taking out here? We're taking marbles out 2 times. And already as I'm reading this question, I'm imagining a tree diagram in my head, because there's a process that involves 2 things. That's what probability, when you're using a tree diagram, you use probability. You use a tree diagram to explain the probability events, because there's 2 steps. Someone takes something out, they observe what's happening, and then they put it aside, and then they do something again, right? So the question is, how do we then draw a tree diagram there? Is there any grade 11 learner who can maybe assist us in terms of what will be the legs of our tree diagram? What would we write on the legs of our tree diagram? Any grade 11 learner? Okay, there's no one there. So if there's no one, the first thing you want to write there is the possible events. The possible event is that if I take out a marble, it will either be red or it will be blue. So you'll write R for red in the first leg, and then you write blue for the possibility of a blue marble. And then what you're also wanting to note is the probability of something happening. And remember that probability depends on the number of events that are possible. So you want to ask yourself, how many events are possible here? Or rather, how many total events are possible here? There's 5 possible marbles that you can take out here. So that's a total possible event. So that's the total probability that's available. So what you are wanting to do then is to say, the probability of taking out a red is how many reds are there? There's 2 reds. So it's going to be 2 out of 5. So you write that on the leg that has a probability of red. What is the probability of taking out a blue marble? A blue marble, it will be 3 out of 5. So the other one is 2 out of 5. The other one is 3 out of 5. So that's what you have as your first legs in your probability. And then remember, now you've taken out a marble and you've put it aside. And in your first leg, you said, I took out a red marble. So now in your second leg, you're going to say, what's the possibility that I'll take out a red or a blue? So you're going to say, okay, what's the possibility that I'll take out a red, given that I've taken out a red already? Can someone tell me how many red marbles are available at this stage?
There's 1 marble left.
There's 1 red marble left. And then, Mr. Kanya, while you're still there, how many marbles are available in total?
There's 4.
There's 4. So for red, thank you so much to say. So for red, you're going to say 1 out of 4 as the possibility for red. So you've got your red and then red. And then in your second leg, you've taken out a red And there's and then now you want to count the possibility of taking out a blue. How many blues are left at the stage? Can someone answer that for us? Somebody? Hello? Okay. You haven't taken out any red, any blue marble at the stage. So what you are then going to say, okay, the possibility of taking out a blue marble, given that at first you had taken out a red, is that there's still 3 marbles that are left that are blue. But in terms of the total number of marbles in the bag, there's only 4. So it's going to be 3 out of 4, right? So the possibility of taking out a blue marble, given the first marble that you took out was red, is going to be 3 out of 4 marbles that are available. So we have plotted out both the events that could happen. We started out with taking out a red and then a red, then a blue. Now we need to do the second leg, the bottom leg of the tree diagram, that then speaks to us about taking out a marble that is now blue in color. The probability of taking out a blue marble is going to be 3 out of 5 in the first instance, because the bag is still full. It still has 5 marbles in total. And then we take out, we take out a blue, but what is the probability of taking out a blue? It's 3, because there's 3 possible blues out of 5. So it's going to be 3 out of 5. And then we're going to have to do second legs. I'm so sad that now I can't write because I'm having to not use the link anymore. So now in taking out the second leg, you've taken out a blue. Now the question is, what's the probability you'll take out a red the second time? Can someone answer that? We've taken out a blue, but now we want to know what's the probability that you'll take out a blue. Oh, sorry, a red after we've taken out a blue the first time.
2 out of 4.
2 out of 4, because there's 2 possible red marbles, and in total there's 4 marbles that are remaining. Listen, Kaya, before you leave me, it seems like this topic is not a favorite for everyone, so I'm holding you hostage now. Now, if I now need to figure out the possibility of taking out a blue after I've taken out a blue, so what's the second leg I need to work with when Alisa Kanya? Second blue.
Sorry, can you please repeat that again?
What is the probability that I'll take out a second blue? And given that I've taken a blue already. 2 out of?
It's going to be 3. 2 out of 4.
There.
No, 2 out of 3, sorry.
2 out of 4. Thank you so much, Lisa Kanya. So that's basically what question 1 is answering, is wanting 8.1.1. It's wanting us to draw a tree diagram that represents the probabilities that are associated with each branch. And as you can see, it's 3 marks. So the mark allocation would really be 1 for the first branch, where you're taking out a red or a blue. And then the first branch, you'll have to branch it further. You take a red or a blue, and then the other one, you take it out, a red or a blue. That's how your 3 marks are allocated. Then the second question they're asking is determine the probability of first taking a red marble and then taking a blue marble in that order. So the order here is important. Okay, the order is important. They're saying we first take out a red and then take out a blue marble. So once the order is important in probability, we then think about what is called conditional probability. So this is probability that we'll take out, a red marble, given that we have taken out a blue marble. So what I want to show FGLers when it comes to that is that you then want to think about what formula are you having. Oza, could you just please confirm if you are able to see my past paper?
All right, so I'm still, okay, sure.
Are you able to see it?
I'm still looking at the screenshot that you then took and pasted on the slide.
Let's just do something. Yeah.
Okay, sure.
Does that work?
Ah, perfect. There it is.
Lovely. So in the question paper now, you are then wanting to see, okay, are there any formulas that are concerned with conditional probability? So when it comes to conditional probability, one of the formulas you are having to remember or having to know is that there's a formula that says the probability of A given B is equal to the probability of the intersection of the two, so which is A and B, divided by the probability of B. So what this means is, in order to calculate what they are wanting here, which is the probability of taking out the first marble being red, and then taking out a blue marble in that order. So basically they want blue given that red was out. So that's the order they are wanting it. So you want to write this formula that you know in the letters that are concerned in your particular problem. So in your problem, you're dealing with R and B. So what that means is you are wanting the probability of blue and red at the same time divided by the probability of red. The probability of red. Now, remember, you've got your tree diagram. And in your tree diagram, what you would have had is the probability of red. And then also you would have had the probability of blue. Probability of blue. And then you would have had further branches that are then talking to what will happen in the second step of choosing in your hat. So in your second choosing of the hat, remember what would have happened is that you would have chosen a blue given there was a red before. Because what the tree diagram is saying is that here you are saying this is what has happened first. So what has happened first is that either you have chosen a red marble or you have chosen a blue marble. And then in the second leg, you are saying, I've chosen a blue marble given that I've chosen a red marble. So basically what they are wanting here is whatever you have in this branch, right? In this branch, divided by, so this multiplied by this, divided by the probability of red, which is exactly here. You are wanting to take the connection, which is the intersection between the blue and the red. So whatever probability we had here, because we had said for red marbles, we had said it's 2 marbles out of 5. That's what we had said. There's 2 marbles available that are red out of 5. But if we're taking out a blue, given that we've already taken out a red already, we had said how many blues are available. There's 3 blues available, but how many marbles are available to take from? There's 3 of them. So what that means is that to complete this probability, you need to take the 2 out of 5, multiply it by the 3 out of 4 for the probability of the intersection, and then divide it by the probability of 2 over 3. But what that means is that you're actually just talking about 3 over 4. So if it's important that you are able to write your probabilities in this fashion, where you are saying the second leg is basically saying, I'm taking out a blue given, that's what this line is meaning, given that I've taken out a red already. So what that means, the answer to this is basically 2 out of 5. Are there any questions when it comes to how to work out the tree diagram on its own and how to pull out information out of the tree diagram? Okay, people are quiet there. The other question that is contained in probability requires you to remember basic formula when it comes to probability. So before we even tackle 2.8.2, what I want you to remember about probability is that there's basic formulas that you are wanting to remember. You are wanting to remember the identity, which says the probability of A or B is equal to the probability of A plus the probability of B minus the probability of A intersecting B. So that's your identity. You go into the paper knowing this identity. It's true for all situations. It's an identity, it's a written proof. It's a proof thing that you must know, basically. So it's something that you can use in all circumstances. However, there might be things that are involved in that particular probability question that involve particular facts about those events that might be mutually exclusive. When they say events are mutually exclusive, which they seem to be saying in 8.2.1, what you want to remember is that mutually exclusive events means that the events do not occur at the same time, meaning that the probability of an intersection is equal to 0. So if that's the case, it means that the identity I've written here in the first step, in the place of this, we basically have to substitute 0. But when do you do this? Only when your events are mutually exclusive. It's only appropriate if your events are mutually exclusive. The other thing you want to remember is when are events independent? Events are independent if this probability is equal to the product of your two probabilities, which is probability of A multiplied by the probability of B, multiplied by the probability of B. So in your toolkit or your cheat sheet, these are things you must go into the paper knowing about probability. That what is the identity? What is the definition of mutually exclusive? What is the definition of independent? So here, if they're asking you, are the two events mutually exclusive? The first thing you want to ask yourself, in the information am I given, is there any information that tells me about the probability of the two happening together being equal to 0? Let's quickly read there because I can see Oza is wanting to say her last words. So they're saying here, A and B are two events. The probability that A will occur is 0.4. That's the probability of A only. And the probability that B will occur is 0.3. And then the other information they give us is the probability of both of either A or B is 0.58. So it means that this part, this is A or B, is 0.58. And then they're saying the probability of A is 0.4 and the probability of B is 0.7. Remember, if the events are mutually exclusive, it means that this here is 0, meaning if you add these two, they're supposed to give you this. But in this case, if you take 0.4 and you add 0.3, you get 0.7. And then this side is equal to 0.58, meaning that this examiner didn't ask you mutually exclusive very directly. They didn't ask you to to prove directly that these events are mutually exclusive. You needed to deduce. So you are then at level 3 in terms of your understanding of your questions. You are deducing information by taking the formula and trying to get out information out of it. So your answer here is that the events are not mutually exclusive. And why is that? Because the probability of the union or the probability of A or B is not equal to the probability of A or B, meaning that there is a number associated with this that will make it equal. So the events are not mutually exclusive. Oza, I'm handing over to you, sister.
No, I'm not even going to end the session because I do want us to be able to delve into 2 other key questions before we say goodbye. I'm going to ask that we maybe try and allocate 5 minutes to each of those. Also, I want to thank Ulisa Kanya for her great interaction with you on the first part of this question and reward her with an additional 200,000 Genius Dollar points. So thank you so much. If Jealous, if you want to get some more Genius Dollar points, take this opportunity and engage on this next one. All right. Usibila Somtunzi has a question here. It's This Thina, can you please help by doing a grade 10 financial math question?
Okay.
So there's that financial math question and then a grade 11 question on the nature of roots.
Okay, so maybe let's start with the grade 11 because we are
Since
on
we're
a grade
already here.
11 past paper already. Also, I think you guys can agree this needs a session on its own.
Yes, which is exactly what we're doing, FGL, is next week on the 23rd, Thina is going to have a focus session with grade 11 and 12s, just focusing on mathematics. So there'll be an opportunity to delve into these questions a lot deeper next week, Saturday.
Sure. Okay, so nature of roots. So guys, when it comes to nature of roots, I know people want to memorize that table that says when delta is less than 0, then your roots are, your roots are non-real, etc., etc. I usually say I don't do well with memorization, I do well with understanding. So one of the things I want you to think of before we even delve into the question itself is I want you to think of nature of roots visually first. That is, what does it mean for, for roots to not be real? What are nature of roots? Nature, mean the nature of Thina. How is Thina? So when you talk about nature of roots, it means that we are asking how are the roots for this particular function? That's what it is, right? So we here have drawn a parabola that is flying above the x-axis. It's not cutting the x-axis, so it means it doesn't have any roots. And then I'll draw another parabola here, and it's cutting the x-axis, and it has 2 roots. And then I can draw another parabola, doesn't have to face up, doesn't have to be smiling, can be sad. And let's suppose that this parabola actually touches the x-axis and it touches once, meaning that it does have roots. And we usually say these roots are, are the same, meaning that they're equal. So those are examples of the kinds of roots you could get. So the first question, that's the first thing you must remember when it comes to nature of roots, is that you have different kinds of roots and you need to be able to imagine them, so that when they ask you that kind of question integrated into functions as a level 3 or 4 question, it doesn't throw you off when they say move the function, or move the function up such that it doesn't, or what do you need to do, what k you need to add in order for this function to have real roots or non-real roots. Okay, so that's the visual aspect of it. But now we then say the nature of these roots, how these roots are described, because remember, we've got our quadratic formula, which grade 11s and 10, grade 11s and 12s will know, which says x is equal to minus b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac. So I'll just write delta here because that's what it is, over 2a. So basically, this formula is how we actually find our x's, right? That's how we find our roots. So we then using this formula to say, listen, at some point your calculator sometimes gives you math error. And that math error occurs because something has caused your calculator to not identify what is happening. Either you've put something awkward under a square root, or you've put something awkward in the denominator of a fraction. And most of the time when you've got a math error and you're trying to find this, it's because something is happening under the square root, and that is the function of delta. So we then say in mathematics, in order to know the nature of the roots, all you need to know is how is your delta. If your delta is negative, you'll definitely then get no roots here because your calculator is going to say math error. So here in the visual I've drawn, it means the one that's flying above or below the axis, it means your delta is negative, right? And then when will your roots be equal? Think about it. In your calculator, normally when you calculate this, you normally press everything in, and you either press a minus or a plus, you change it. But if it doesn't matter whether you've pressed a minus or a plus, it means here you've added something that doesn't make a change. And I want to ask someone, what is it in maths that we can add to something and it doesn't cause a change to it? Anyone can answer that? Yes, Mbalenhle?
Ma'am, 0.
It's 0. So it means that in order for these roots to be the same, it means that delta is equal to 0. So for my roots to be the same, meaning that I only have one root, I want you to always think of equal roots or same roots as them basically saying you've got one root. So that only happens if your delta is equal to 0. So what this then means is that the question they are asking is, they're asking here, if f of x is equal to 0, has roots, which are these guys, for which k values will the roots be equal? For which k values, meaning the question is asking about k, right? And whenever they mention roots, I want you to think of delta only. So we don't need to work with everything under this formula. We just need to work with the delta. So our delta basically is equal to 3 minus 12k squared. And what kind of roots do they want? They want our roots to be equal. So it means that we are actually talking about which visual. We're talking about this visual in my picture. So what that means is that we are saying delta here must be 0, and then I must then solve for k. So it actually depends on what kinds of nature of roots they've given you. In this case, the roots are equal. So it means here I'm just needing to solve for k when delta is equal to 0. And I can then take that to the left-hand side. So it's going to be 12k squared is equal to 3. And then I can solve for k by dividing by 12 on both sides and then finding a square root of k. So I've then answered the question in terms of what values of k will make this true. So that is answering the nature of roots question. Azad, do we still have time to do the finance question for grade 10?
So I do want to do that, but I also want to find out, so this, we need to importantly highlight that level 3, level 4 distinction in terms of the question. So this example that you just did now, this question 1.3 specifically, would it be a level 3 or level 4? Level 2 question. Yeah. And
the reason why it's level 2, Oza, the reason why it's level 2, Oza, is remember level 3 and 4, there's some newness in it, or there's some complexity in it. So this one is basically something that anyone can repeat. So for example, if I were to open another past paper now, that's how you also know whether a question is level 3 or 4 or 1 or 2. If I can open a past paper and I can get something similar to this, then it means this kind of question in its nature is 1 or 2.
Okay. All right. Got it. All right. Perfect.
Yeah. So in its nature, it's 1 or 2. So this one is 2. It's not really 1 because you're identifying the formula. You're also needing to link the formula to its concept. So I'd say it floats nicely between 2 and 3, but it doesn't sit nicely as a 3, I would say.
All right. So without answering a level 3 or level 4 question, can you scan the paper and maybe give me an example of one that is a level 3 or level 4, just so that
definitely
when they see it, they can then
Here's
recognize
a nice one. Here's a nice one. 2.3. 2.3.
So it makes it a level
4 question.
Level 4
question. It's a level 4 question. It's a level 4 question because what is in it, the meat in it, Oza, the examiner, in terms of how they've taught it out, there might have been a similar question before, right? But what they're then trying to get out of the student is that it's a new concept that they're wanting to get out of them, that they want them to think about how to apply the maths they know in this particular problem. So 2.3 in how it's sitting, it's definitely a level 4 question.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Got it.
I can go to another one as an example. This is standard. Question 3 is standard. So what you also notice, math students, is that level 4 questions don't necessarily sit on their own. For example, this question is a standard question it might then start being tricky towards the end, for example. So you might then have a level 4 question hidden there at the end. And this is where the strength of the student normally then declines. They answer. The questions are very basic. The questions are repetitive, they're routine. And then at the end, the examiner slides in a nice thing that says, now I want you to see, were you able to go with this question? Because remember, this is a functions question, right? So the examiner isn't allowed to fully ask it as a level 4, right? So they still need to give everyone an opportunity to go through the different levels, level 1, level 2, level 3, and then they're sliding in a level 4 complexity in it to then test, when does your knowledge end when it comes to these functions as a topic? Yeah.
Okay, absolutely got it. I want to say that, of course, Umbade, you'll also be getting some future Global Leaders Club Genius points for interaction and engagement this evening. I want to remind the FGLers, because I see that they're asking some very specific questions, that of course there's an opportunity for you to engage with the Tremendous Tutors program on the Future Global Leaders Club website, where you're able to actually book your one-on-one sessions with the tutor. Also, Thina already mentioned how important it is for you to be able to test your knowledge and to be able to elevate above a certain level of learning and knowledge by engaging with the tutor. That extra set of eyes, that microscope that she was mentioning. Is this a level 4 question that you've highlighted there in 6.8?
Yes, Oza. And they do it very frequently like this, Oza, where they'll give you an opportunity. Again, it's a functions question. Everyone is meant to be able to engage with this question from its start, so everyone has fun with it, and then this is where we then say, are you an A student? We then toss this into it to say, then finalize it for me, Mdanam, and show me that you can get to that. Yeah.
That 100% that we're aiming for. Yes. That 100% that we're aiming for. Okay. Yes. I do want to hold you for like 4 more minutes. I do want us to tackle that financial math question for grade 10. But we're going to tackle it very quickly and just covering the basics and the strokes for not necessarily answering the question, but just grounding what would be, that's if you can get to it quickly.
Sure. Okay, let me just see. That was grade 10, no?
Grade 10 financial math, and that question came from, I think it's Isivile.
Okay. So financial maths at grade 10 level is quite, easy, I would say. It's one of those topics that one can master and be able to, once they've mastered it, be able to trust that they know what they're doing. It isn't yet complex at grade 10 in terms of the kinds of questions you could be asked. And the formulas that are involved, are also quite, easy to follow. This does not look like a grade 10 paper, definitely not. This is grade 10. Okay. Lovely.
Right, well, you look for that question, Thina. I'm actually asked a very great question in terms of strategies to overcome frustrations with mathematics, especially when you're studying. How can the FGL stay motivated? What techniques do they use to stay motivated when you get to a frustrating point?
Sure. I think it's we get frustrated, Oza. All of us doing different things that we do. I think it's also reminding yourself, of the great times you've had with the subject. You've had some highs, I hope. And also reminding yourself of your goals in the subject. What are you wanting to achieve with the subject? And reminding yourself that we are all not built the same. So what might come easy to Oza might not come easy to Lisakanya. What might come easy to Umbalele might not come easy to Utina. So it's also remembering that. So in your frustrated moments, try also to lean on to your support system. Like you've just said, Oza, reach out for help. You guys have a great system of having tutors for them, getting that help and getting assistance when they need the assistance, right? And speaking to your tutor in terms of where do you actually get frustrated, what frustrates you? It might not be the whole thing when you're looking at it. So it's very important to have an extra pair of eyes to actually help you look at the problem, I would say. So the frustrated moments will happen, but it's also stepping back to say, what is my goal? And how do I overcome this frustration? How have I overcome the frustration even in other areas of my life, not just in maths, and apply that also? Sorry to rush that question. I found the finance question. It's question 4 here. So it says 7 years ago, I won't actually do this, but I'll highlight what I think students actually need to dissect out of the question. 7 years ago, it's important information, the number of years. Student needs to, note this for themselves. It's 7 years ago, Mrs. Gray decided to invest. They're investing, they're putting in money, and it's 18,000 into a bank account that is paid simple interest. You're highlighting that, the kind of interest, and when is this interest, being accrued. So it's per annum, 4.5% per annum. Because the times also change, can be per month, it can be every 6 months, etc. So you want to highlight all the parts of information that is important. Calculate how much interest, Mrs. Gray. What are we calculating? The amount of interest. So they're not wanting to know how much Mrs. Gray will have in the bank in total. They just want to know the interest component. So the student also needs to pay attention to that here we're just calculating the interest, or rather what is wanted is the interest. So you'll use your simple interest formula, which will be in your formula sheet, or which you'll need to remember. Take the 18,000 multiplied by 1 plus I multiplied by n, which is the number of years. And that formula will give you the total amount of that Mrs. Gray has made. You then need to subtract the 18,000 because that's the initial amount capital they've put in place. So you can't also include that in the interest, right? So it's going to be 18,000, but there will be interest that they've accumulated, and that's what you give as an answer. I'll do 4.1.2 only, Oza, and then we'll end it there. Is that fine?
That's perfect.
Okay. Mrs. Gray wants to buy a television set that costs 27,660. Now, if the average inflation rate, so again, the TV is costing this now, right now, we want to highlight that. The rate of inflation, because that's the amount this TV will then, increase by per annum. So it's for the last 5 years, rather, sorry. Has been 6.7 per annum. So that's how much, you can inflate that amount by per year. Calculate the cost of the television 5 years ago. But now you have to think of it this way. It's 5 years ago, meaning that the amount must then have been less. So those are other things as math students. You must be in that mental state of putting yourself in Mrs. Gray's shoes. That when you are answering, you're not just answering a question, a math question, you're also putting yourself in her shoes. So that when you get an answer, you're expecting this TV to be cheaper 5 years ago, meaning that your formula that you have to use here, if it's 5 years ago, has to have a minus, not a plus. So you use your formula, then calculate that, and you should be getting an amount that's significantly less than 27,660. Oza, I think we have to call it a day.
Well, thank you so much, Thina. I think we've covered so much in this session. I mean, the important thing is that it's an ongoing process, the journey to 100%. You have to be consistent, you have to practice, must do your papers, must engage with your teachers, and you have to put in an effective maths hour every single day. There is no day off as you're pursuing your 100%. Yeah. We look forward to having you next week on the 23rd. I want to remind the Future Global Leaders Club
Grade 11s, grade 12s, please come through. If there's a way also for them to send, topics in advance, I think that will even help. Yeah.
Perfect. So we're going to open up the platform and allow them to send through their topics to Upward to make sure that the grade 11s and grade 12s, when they have that focus session on the 23rd, you are tackling the issues that they really have. Also a reminder, of course, that we have our tremendous tutors available as well, as for free, available to tackle any technical issues that you have with your subjects. So Thina, thank you so much. We look forward to having you again on the 23rd.
Thank you so much, Oza. Thank you for the platform, and thanks to the FGLS, and all the best to those who are writing exams and end of term tests.
Fantastic. Thank you.